The last resort. Chief Engineer Sarah Chen knew exactly three things as she floated in the U.S. Defiant's zero-gravity engine room. The experimental quantum drive was completely dead. 12 Syntherian warships were closing in on their position, and she had approximately 20 minutes to perform a miracle. Engineering, status report. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system, impressively steady despite their dire situation. Sarah pushed off against a bulkhead, propelling herself toward the quantum drive's central processing core. Remember how I said the Q drive needed at least 3 more months of testing? Sarah replied, scanning the holographic diagnostics floating around her. This is why. The containment field collapsed during the jump. We're lucky we didn't end up spread across 3 dimensions. The silence from the bridge spoke volumes. The Defiant had been humanity's first attempt at true faster-than-light travel, pushing the boundaries of theoretical physics in ways that made traditional engineers lose sleep. Sarah had fought against this test jump, but the advancing Syntherian fleet had forced their hand. Options? Rodriguez finally asked. Sarah's eyes darted between the failing systems on her display. The Syntherians, beings of pure energy who had evolved beyond organic forms millennia ago, were notorious for their technological superiority and their complete intolerance of inefficient species. They considered humanity's messy, organic approach to technology an affront to their perfect, crystalline existence. Conventional options? 0. Sarah answered, already pulling tools from her belt. Unconventional options? Working on it. She kicked off toward the auxiliary power manifold, her mind racing. The Syntherians operated on pure logic, their ships and weapons governed by perfect mathematical precision. But Sarah had always believed that humanity's greatest strength lay in their ability to be brilliantly illogical. They're demanding our surrender, Rodriguez informed her. They're calling us, and I quote, an aberration in the ordered universe. Sarah snorted as she yanked open an access panel. Let me guess, they're offended by our chaotic and inefficient technology. Among other things, the quantum drive had been designed to create a controlled tear in spacetime, using principles that even Sarah didn't fully understand. But its failure had left behind something interesting, a cascade of quantum fluctuations that were technically a catastrophic system failure, but also, Captain, Sarah said slowly, a crazy idea forming. Remember that bug in the auxiliary systems I never got around to fixing? The one that causes random power surges. The one you said would take too long to trace through the redundant systems. Yes. Sarah grinned, pulling out her tablet. Well, what if instead of fixing it, we made it worse? Much worse. She could almost hear Rodriguez's eyebrows rising. Explain. The Syntherians are beings of pure energy, right? They process information at quantum speeds, but they're predictable. Their weapons target our shields by analyzing the frequency patterns and calculating the perfect resonance to disrupt them. Sarah's fingers flew across her tablet, reprogramming system protocols on the fly. But what if our shield frequencies were completely random? Not just random, chaos theory random. You want to intentionally introduce chaos into our defense systems? Rodriguez asked incredulously. That's completely insane. Yes, but also possibly brilliant. Sarah was already rerouting power connections. I can use the quantum fluctuations from the drive failure to seed the randomization. The Syntherians won't be able to predict our shield frequencies because there won't be any pattern to predict. And this will work. Sarah hesitated for a fraction of a second. Theoretically, no idea. But they're going to fire on us anyway. We might as well give them something that offends their sensibilities. The ship's sensors detected weapons lock from the Syntherian fleet. Time had run out. Do it, Rodriguez ordered. Sarah's fingers danced across the controls, deliberately introducing cascading errors into the shield systems. She turned the bug into a feature, letting the quantum fluctuations influence shield harmonics in ways that would give any respectable engineer nightmares. The power grid began to flicker and pulse in patterns that seemed random, but were actually governed by the beautiful mathematics of chaos theory. The first Syntherian energy blast struck their shields and dissipated harmlessly. "It's working," Sarah exclaimed, watching the readings with a mix of disbelief and triumph. "Their targeting systems can't adapt fast enough to our shield fluctuations. They're literally too perfect to handle our imperfection." The Syntherian ships launched another barrage, their energy weapons precisely calibrated based on their previous scan of the attempt. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting?" "We can't jump, but maybe we can." Sarah gestured vaguely with her hands. "Wobble. Create localized space-time distortions. Not enough to move us, but enough to make our position." She searched for the right words, probabilistically uncertain. "You want to make our ship quantum uncertain?" Rodriguez asked incredulously. "Is that even possible?" "Technically, everything is quantum uncertain. We're just usually too big for it to matter. But with the drive in this state and the shield modifications already in place," Sarah shrugged, "we'd be essentially turning the whole ship into a quantum probability problem." The tactical officer interrupted. "The probes are beginning to synchronize their scans. Shield penetration in 3 minutes." Rodriguez looked at Sarah. "What are the chances this works?" "According to quantum mechanics, all of them, simultaneously, until we try it." Sarah's fingers were already flying over her tablet. "Though I should mention this might make everyone feel a bit weird." "Define weird." "Remember that time in Academy Physics when they explained how technically there's a tiny probability that all your atoms could spontaneously quantum tunnel through a wall?" "Yes. It'll feel like that, except with the whole ship, and on purpose." Sarah paused. "Also, I can't guarantee which reality we'll collapse into when they try to observe us." Rodriguez pinched the bridge of his nose. "Do it." Sarah initiated the sequence, routing power from the zombie quantum drive into the shield matrix, using the quantum fluctuations as a carrier wave for something that probably violated several laws of physics. The ship began to vibrate at frequencies that shouldn't have been possible. Around them, the Syntherian probes suddenly stopped, their perfect formation faltering as their sensors tried to pin down exactly where the Defiant was, and wasn't, simultaneously. "Status," Rodriguez demanded. "We're everywhere and nowhere," Sarah replied, watching in fascination as probability curves danced across her screen. "Quantum superposition on a macro scale. They can't target what they can't locate with certainty." Through the view screen, they could see the probes beginning to spin in confused patterns, their perfect geometry breaking down as they encountered something their programming simply couldn't process: a starship-sized quantum uncertainty principle. Chaos theory. The Syntherian High Command vessel pulsed with energy that could only be described as absolute fury. Inside its crystalline command center, Prime Commander Vix faced the largest gathering of Syntherian consciousness nodes ever assembled for a single tactical situation, the subject of their unprecedented meeting. One small human vessel that refused to behave according to any known laws of physics or engineering. "Impossible," stated the science node, its crystalline form flickering rapidly. "The human vessel exists in a state of quantum uncertainty that should not be sustainable for any object larger than a particle. Yet it persists. Their shield harmonics continue to defy prediction," added the combat node. "Each attempt to analyze the pattern creates new variables we cannot quantify." It is. The node's crystal structure dimmed slightly, inefficient. Meanwhile, aboard the U.S. Defiant, Sarah Chen was having the time of her life. The quantum uncertainty field she created was holding, but it needed constant adjustment to maintain its impossible state. Her engineering station had become a mad scientist's dream, surrounded by holographic readouts showing probability curves, quantum state calculations, and what appeared to be a small tear in the fabric of reality. "Status report," Captain Rodriguez called out, his voice steady despite the fact that his coffee cup was existing in 3 different positions simultaneously. "Good news and weird news," Sarah replied, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces. The good news is the quantum uncertainty field is stable. The weird news is we're technically violating about 17 different laws of physics, and I'm pretty sure we're occasionally existing in dimensions that don't have names yet. Can the Syntherians break through? Sarah glanced at her readings. They're trying something new. They've brought in what looks like their equivalent of theoretical physicists. I think we've officially graduated from military threat to scientific anomaly. The Syntherian fleet had indeed changed formation. Their perfect geometric patterns had shifted, creating what appeared to be a massive sensor array. Energy pulses of increasing complexity probed the space around the Defiant, trying to collapse its quantum state into something comprehensible. That's when Sarah noticed something interesting in her readings. Each time the Syntherians tried to observe and measure the Defiant's position, they were actually adding energy to the quantum uncertainty field. Their attempts to understand the impossible were making it more impossible. "Captain," Sarah said, "a new idea forming. Remember how in quantum mechanics, the act of observation affects the thing being observed?" Vaguely, Rodriguez replied cautiously, having learned that this tone from his chief engineer usually preceded something either brilliant or terrifying. "Well, the Syntherians are trying really hard to observe us right now, and all that observation energy is actually feeding back into our field." Sarah's eyes lit up with a kind of enthusiasm that made safety officers nervous. What if we could use their own perfect measurements against them? Before Rodriguez could respond, the ship shuddered as the Syntherians launched their most coordinated attempt yet to penetrate the quantum uncertainty field. Multiple energy beams struck the field simultaneously, each precisely calibrated to collapse the quantum waveform. Sarah's hands flew across her controls. Instead of trying to resist the energy, she began routing it through the quantum drive's remains, using the Syntherians' own perfectly ordered energy to fuel the chaos. The uncertainty field didn't just hold, it grew. "They're pulling back," the tactical officer reported, sounding stunned. Their entire sensor array just scrambled. On the main view screen, they could see the Syntherian ships actually retreating, their perfect formation showing signs of disorder for the first time. Sarah checked her readings and started laughing. "What's so funny?" Rodriguez asked. "We just weaponized the observer effect," Sarah explained, wiping tears from her eyes. "Their attempt to measure us with perfect precision created so much quantum uncertainty that it fed back into their own systems. They're experiencing quantum uncertainty by proxy." "You're saying we infected them with chaos?" "More like we showed them a mirror of their own perfect observation, and their systems couldn't handle the recursive loop." Sarah paused, watching new readings appear. "Though we might have also accidentally created a small region of space where the laws of physics are more like helpful suggestions." The comm system crackled to life, and Prime Commander Vix's hologram appeared again. The usually perfect crystalline form was now slightly asymmetrical, its edges fuzzy with probability curves. "This," Vix stated, its voice modulating through several frequencies at once, "is unacceptable. You have introduced uncertainty into our perfect system. Our quantum computers are generating errors. Our navigation arrays are reporting positions with error bars." The last words were spoken with something approaching horror. "Welcome to the real universe," Sarah couldn't help replying, "where everything's made up and the points don't matter. Our entire fleet is experiencing cascading probability failures." Vix continued, ignoring her. "This damage to the perfect order must be contained." Or, Sarah suggested, "you could learn to embrace a little chaos. Sometimes the best solutions come from working with uncertainty rather than trying to eliminate it." The Syntherian commander's form flickered again, and for a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw something like curiosity in its crystalline structure. "Your methods are illogical, inefficient, and completely contrary to all established principles of engineering." And yet, Rodriguez interjected smoothly, "They work." There was a long pause, during which Sarah was fairly certain the entire Syntherian command structure was having an existential crisis. Finally, Vix spoke again. "Perhaps There is something to be learned here about the relationship between order and chaos, about the possibilities that exist in uncertainty. The human variable. The U.S. Defiant hung in space like a quantum riddle, surrounded by a fleet of increasingly confused Syntherian vessels. Inside their crystalline ships, a revolution was taking place, not one of weapons or violence, but of mathematics and philosophy. The perfect order that had defined their civilization for millennia was being challenged by a human engineer who treated the laws of physics like optional guidelines. Sarah Chen stood in the Defiance conference room, facing a holographic assembly of Syntherian scientists who had demanded an explanation of her methods. The crystalline beings flickered with varying frequencies that she was beginning to recognize as emotional states, mostly variations of bafflement and reluctant fascination. "Let me understand this correctly," spoke the lead scientist. "It's form a complex dodecahedron. You deliberately introduced errors into your systems." "Not errors exactly," Sarah replied, pulling up a holographic display of her own. "Think of it more like jazz. The Syntherian's crystalline forms dimmed in confusion." "Explain." "In music, jazz uses structured improvisation. There are rules, but the beauty comes from knowing when and how to break them. Engineering can be the same way." Sarah manipulated the hologram, showing the complex interplay of quantum states and chaos patterns that kept the Defiant in its impossible state of existence. "But this defies all established principles," protested another scientist. "Your ship should not be able to maintain quantum superposition. The energy requirements alone should be impossible." "Yes," Sarah agreed cheerfully. "But we're not maintaining it. We're surfing it. We're letting the quantum uncertainty propagate naturally and just nudging it in useful directions, like riding a wave." The Syntherians' collective frequency shifted to what Sarah was pretty sure was the equivalent of a headache. The lead scientist spoke again. "Your metaphors are as chaotic as your methods. Yet, its crystalline surface rippled. We cannot deny the results. Our latest scans show that your ship's quantum field has actually begun to stabilize." Sarah blinked in surprise and checked her own readings. The scientist was right. The quantum uncertainty field had settled into a strange sort of equilibrium, like a soap bubble that had found its perfect shape. "Huh," she said. "That's new." Back on the bridge, Captain Rodriguez was engaged in his own delicate negotiation with Prime Commander Vix. The Syntherian leader's form had gradually become more stable, though it now displayed a subtle asymmetry that would have been unthinkable days ago. "Your engineer's chaos has infected half our fleet," Vix stated. 12 of our vessels are now exhibiting quantum uncertainty patterns. Our perfect computational models are generating results with probability distributions." The commander managed to make this sound like a personal insult. "And yet," Rodriguez pointed out carefully, "your affected ships are reporting increased efficiency in several systems. The quantum uncertainty seems to be creating new possibilities your previous models couldn't predict." "This is true," Vix admitted reluctantly. "Our energy consumption has decreased by 17.3% in ships experiencing quantum variance. But the cost in computational precision." "Maybe precision isn't everything," Rodriguez suggested. "Humans learned long ago that sometimes the best solutions come from embracing uncertainty rather than trying to eliminate it." In the engine room, Sarah was dealing with an unexpected development of her own. The quantum drive, which had been existing in its zombie state between functional and non-functional, had started to show signs of genuine revival. The chaos they'd introduced into the system hadn't just created a defense, it was actually repairing the drive in ways that defied conventional engineering. "That's not possible," Sarah muttered, staring at her readings. Then she grinned. "Which probably means it's working exactly as it should." She called up to the bridge. "Captain, remember how I said the quantum drive was dead? Well, it's getting better. The quantum uncertainty field we created, it's not just a shield anymore. It's evolving." "Evolving into what?" Rodriguez asked, a note of wariness in his voice. I'm not entirely sure, Sarah admitted. But the quantum fluctuations are starting to synchronize with the Syntherian ships affected by our chaos field. It's like the uncertainty is creating a new kind of order, not their kind of perfect, crystalline order, but something more organic, something that exists between order and chaos. The Syntherian scientists, who were still monitoring her holographic explanations, erupted in a cascade of crystalline frequencies. Impossible. Fascinating. Heretical. Revolutionary. Sarah watched as her readings continued to shift and evolve. The quantum uncertainty field was no longer just a defensive measure. It had become a bridge between two fundamentally different approaches to engineering and existence. Where the Syntherians saw chaos, humans saw possibility. Where humans embraced uncertainty, the Syntherians found new patterns. I think, Sarah said slowly, we've accidentally created something entirely new. A quantum harmony that exists because of the differences between our species, not in spite of them. Throughout the Syntherian fleet, ships that had been infected with quantum uncertainty were beginning to display new capabilities. Their perfect crystalline structures hadn't broken. They had adapted, incorporating chaos in ways that made them more resilient, more efficient, and paradoxically, more perfect in their imperfection. Prime Commander Vix, watching this transformation spread through the fleet, made a decision that would change the course of both civilizations. Perhaps, the commander stated, its asymmetrical form now bearing an almost artistic quality, it is time for the Syntherian collective to conduct a grand experiment in imperfection. Trust the engineer. 6 months after what historians would later call the quantum uncertainty incident, Sarah Chen stood in a vast chamber unlike anything humans had ever constructed. The walls were crystalline, but not in the perfect geometric patterns that once defined Syntherian architecture. Instead, they flowed in organic curves that somehow maintained mathematical precision while embracing natural chaos. The chamber was the newly constructed Synthesis Laboratory, a joint human Syntherian engineering facility built to explore the implications of what Sarah had accidentally discovered. Around her, human engineers and Syntherian scientists worked together, their different approaches to problem-solving creating solutions neither species could have developed alone. Still hard to believe all this started because our quantum drive broke down in exactly the right way, Sarah mused, watching a holographic display where a human engineer and a Syntherian scientist were deliberately introducing controlled chaos into a power distribution system. Prime Commander Vix, who had become something of a revolutionary figure among the Syntherians, shifted its crystalline form in what Sarah now recognized as amusement. You humans have a remarkable talent for turning failures into opportunities. We call it working with what you've got, Sarah replied. Though I have to admit, I never expected the Syntherian High Command to embrace chaos theory quite so enthusiastically. The changes in Syntherian society have been profound. The introduction of quantum uncertainty principles into their engineering had led to technological advances that neither species had thought possible. Their ships now incorporated controlled chaos into their design, making them more adaptable and efficient than ever before. The Council of Perfect Order has been renamed, Vix announced, its asymmetrical form rippling with subtle patterns. We are now the Council of Dynamic Equilibrium. Sarah grinned. That's very philosophical of you. Indeed, your demonstration of how imperfection can lead to greater perfection has caused quite the philosophical revolution among my people. Some are even suggesting that our previous pursuit of absolute order was itself a form of entropy, a static state resistant to growth and evolution. Their conversation was interrupted by a young human engineer rushing up to them, tablet in hand. Chief Chen, the tests on the new hybrid drive are complete. You're going to want to see this. The hybrid drive was the culmination of their joint engineering efforts, a propulsion system that combined Syntherian precision with human creativity. Sarah followed the engineer to the testing chamber, Vix flowing alongside them. The drive core hung suspended in the center of the chamber, a beautiful fusion of crystalline structure and organic design. Energy flowed through it in patterns that should have been impossible, yet worked perfectly because of their imperfection. "Run the numbers for me," Sarah requested, already scanning the test results on her tablet. "That's just it," the engineer replied excitedly. "We can't run the numbers, not in any traditional sense. The drive operates in a perpetual state of quantum flux, but it's more stable than anything we've ever built. It's like it's found a sweet spot between chaos and order." Vix's crystalline form pulsed with what Sarah had learned was deep satisfaction. "Just as your quantum uncertainty field created a bridge between our species, this drive creates a bridge between different states of reality. It is both perfect and imperfect simultaneously." "And the power output?" Sarah asked, scrolling through the data. 300% more efficient than our best previous designs," the engineer reported. "The Syntherian quantum computers can't even predict its upper limits because the performance keeps improving as the system learns and adapts." Sarah turned to Vix, ready to admit that sometimes the best solution is the one that doesn't make sense. "I believe," Vix replied with what could only be described as a crystalline smirk, "that is why we recently added a new phrase to our engineering protocols: trust the human engineer." The chamber filled with the sound of human laughter and the harmonic resonance of amused Syntherians. Around them, the hybrid drive hummed with energy, its quantum field fluctuating in patterns that were beautifully, perfectly imperfect. Captain Rodriguez, who had been overseeing the project from the human side, joined them in the chamber. "The Federation Council has approved the Joint Exploration Initiative," he announced. "We're going to be building a fleet of hybrid ships, crewed by both species." "Just imagine," Sarah said, watching the drive's energy patterns dance. "A whole fleet of ships powered by the harmony between chaos and order. We could reach parts of the galaxy we never thought possible. And beyond that," Vix added, its form shifting into what Sarah now recognized as the Syntherian equivalent of excitement. "The applications of quantum uncertainty engineering are still largely unexplored. Every impossible solution we discover seems to open the door to 10 more possibilities we never imagined." Sarah reached out and touched the hybrid drive's housing, feeling the subtle vibrations of order and chaos working in perfect harmony. "You know what the best part is?" she asked, looking around at the assembled humans and Syntherians. "We've proved that the universe's greatest engineering principle isn't perfect order or pure chaos. It's the wisdom to know when to use each." The hybrid drive pulsed with energy, its quantum field extending outward in a pattern that was neither random nor regular, but something wonderfully in between. It was a testament to what could be achieved when two very different approaches to understanding the universe learned to work together. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, reality itself seemed to smile at the sight of creatures of logic and chaos coming together to build something new, something that worked not despite its impossibility, but because of it.